Hello everyone, I'm Vicky Marsland and I am an Associate Director at Christie Co. I specialise in the childcare and education sectors and I work with a wide range of clients, including day nursery operators. I essentially help clients with the buying and selling of businesses, and I've been working in the industry now for about 15 years, and I've had the pleasure of working in the sector for the last 7 years, and it's safe to say there's been quite a lot of changes in the sector during that time. So this is a topic that I really wanted to sort of take the opportunity to discuss and delve into a little bit more. So today we are joined by Jane Todd. Jane is an independent nursery consultant and she offers nursery business support and mentoring to operators across the whole of the UK. Jane has a wealth of experience, having started her career as a primary school teacher and gone on to obtain 3 degrees in education. And in today's session, Jane and I will be discussing some of the key themes we come across in our day-to-day roles. Welcome, Jane. What made you want to move into early years and effectively go on to start your own business?
It was actually having my first baby. So I, as Vicky said, I was school management and I'd recently finished my doctorate in education, and I was working an hour from home. It was long days. My husband was doing the nursery drop-offs, and while I was on maternity leave, my brain had started ticking over, and I was going to music classes with my baby, and my doctorate was in progressive music education, and I just thought, I want to do this, but have a lot more depth to the progression. And what about for those parents who have to go back to work and their children are in nurseries? Can I set up a music-based nursery where the children who attend the nursery can have it, and alongside I can run classes for parents and babies? So that's what I did. I set up a music-based nursery, but it all started on maternity leave.
Were there, specialising in music in early years, was that something that was quite common at the time, or was that sort of something new that was up and coming?
Not necessarily in nurseries per se, as embedded throughout. Some nurseries obviously have people who come in and do music once a week. My whole thing was trying to embed it within the daily routine, and also enabling my practitioners to be able to lead music. So it wasn't just me doing it with the children, so that you didn't have to be a music specialist to be able to do it. So so my whole thing was equipping and training up my staff team, and I also led training through my LEA as well for other settings and things, so that just to make music a lovely part of the daily routine at nursery.
What were the key issues or struggles, I guess, you came across when you first started that nursery that effectively led to where you are now, which we'll move on to?
A lot of legwork to do, and it was a steep learning curve, but I embraced it. It took a lot of blood, sweat and tears. But because I hadn't necessarily got a lot of cash to put into it and I'd set it up from scratch, I had to set it up to run as efficiently and effectively as possible from the start. I also was obviously been passionate about education, as well as then having to run a streamlined business. But it meant from the start, I could make sure my USP, my ethos, my pedagogical approach was all embedded from the start, so that was established for staff, children and families.
The nursery that you basically established and grew into, I know was a very successful nursery that you had. What are some of the, just sort of, I guess, take the opportunity to talk us through some of the key differences that you sort of enabled and that you followed through with, that you perhaps didn't see with other nurseries, that sort of set you apart from a business side of things?
We did run in a very streamlined way, but we never ever compromised on the quality of the education. And I think both being that, as I said, a passionate educator and very business minded, meant I could always keep the two in balance. I'd never compromise on the quality of what we did for the children ever. But likewise, I totally understood the business impact of staffing costs or other decisions. So to the parents and to the staff team, the main thing was those children having the most amazing time. And every child was like my own children went to the nursery. So every child I wanted to be nurtured to grow there. So it wasn't cutting corners. It was just doing things in a way that the children had the best experience. We were an outstanding setting, but that at the same time made business and financial sense as well. So it was made sure I spent a lot of time looking into things to get that side of it right from the off, really.
you have since gone on to set up your own consultancy business, and do a lot of work now with other operators up and down the whole of the UK. What are some of the key challenges that you tend to help operators with? I mean, I will sort of dig in and I can highlight some of the key, not challenges, but some of the key themes that I come across when I'm working with clients. But from your point of view initially, what are some of the key areas that you find you're working with, or some of the key areas you identify as room for improvement when working with operators?
Well, this clearly is evolved and has changed. I mean, when I started the consultancy, it was just before COVID, and it was mainly helping with the pedagogy side and the early years practice side. Then during COVID, because I was schools forum rep as well, so it was helping the LEA and other providers with things like furlough calculations and that side. That there were so many business owners and nursery owners in panic over what it meant for the businesses. So it was helping with that side of it, because there was the extra complication for nursery owners about the funding and furlough. And then coming out of COVID, there was just so many nursery owners who needed or wanted that help with staying viable and sustainable after a very rocky period. So I ended up taking on more and more, just trying to help other nursery owners so that to avoid settings closure. So I was working with settings that were facing closure to try and help them work out their costs of what was coming in, what was going out, what we could tweak, how we could either increase income or decrease outgoings so that they could survive. And for a lot of people, it was only certain tweaks made the difference between closure or keeping going, and not just keeping going, but then becoming quite profitable. So so it's been quite personal, in each setting's very different, which is why I take the time to work with them for their what's individually right for them. But at the moment, the national issue is obviously staffing, shortage of staffing, which is having a knock-on effect for settings either having to take less children or not having the quality staff they may previously have had. So that's brought a different challenge, the staffing side. And then the very current issue, of course, is the new funding rates. So a lot of settings are wanting me to work with them to try and work out a model that's viable for them, because with this, funding can work, absolutely can work, but obviously it's trying to make sure it's right for each setting. But a big issue that people are having is that they've got long waiting lists, higher demand due to the funding, which is great, but the one thing people are having to do is might be rethinking their business model. So it might be the model they've always done for the last 23 years, they can't actually get everyone in, or it's not viable to do it in that way. So a lot of settings at the moment are having to think about whether a 9 till 3 term time only model can work for them, either because of the capacity or the money they're getting back. So it's come to a natural point where a lot of settings are having to review what they're doing and think about, are we going to continue in this way, or do we have to change our business model? So that's what I'm doing day in, day out at the moment with settings.
I'm right in saying that the funding that's provided by the local authorities for early years is for term time only, isn't it, essentially?
It is term time only, which is why settings really have to think about how it's delivered to, and that's the bit about making it viable, not necessarily the hourly rates, it's how you can use places to fill your occupancy and capacity and use it effectively. Because if you only have a child coming for 3 hours, 9 till 12 every day, and you're not really selling the other hours, however good the hourly rate is, it's not going to be the same as a full day. But obviously, if they had 10 hours on a day, you open 8 till 6, all those hours are being utilised. So it's different ways of offering the funding. But obviously, you've got to respond to what the families around you want, what other people are doing, which is why there's so much for nursery owners to get their head around. And for a lot of them at the moment, as I said, they might be having to rethink what they've always done and what's worked, either because they can't get the staff to deliver it or because of the funding. So that is the very current real issue at the moment of making sure that with all this new funding coming in, that you've got a model, a sessional model that works for your setting, and that the owners know their numbers to deliver it. Because that's the other thing, where if settings have always just been profitable, it might be that you'd say to owners, oh, what's your break-even point? And they'd say, well, I don't really know, but I know there's money every month, I'm paying my staff, it's all good, and I'm taking a wage. Whereas now it's a bit more, now actually I really need to know what it's costing me to provide for a baby, for 2, for 3, because they're making decisions. Are they closing the baby room? Are they going to take more preschoolers? Are more preschoolers going to school and they need to take more babies? Well, you can't make those choices if you don't know what it's costing you to provide for those children. So for a lot of nursery owners who think, numbers, I'd rather not do this. It feels a big thing to get the head around it, or the fact that they're having to cover in numbers and things themselves, not having the time to do this. So the knowing your numbers side is a really big thing at the moment for nursery owners, but actually taking the time to do it really helps make informed decisions for the other aspects.
During the process of you setting up your business, and as I think you may have mentioned, you've also bought a business as well, which I believe are two very, very different processes in essence. I mean, you're still looking at the key topics that we've just been discussing, but what surprised you about the two different processes, I guess, if there were any surprises, or what were the main differences between the two processes, and what advice would you give to anyone who's, I guess, looking between the difference? You know, do we source a property? Do we set up from scratch, or do we look to buy an established business? I guess the caveat to that from me would be then there are many different types of businesses to buy. So that might be a further segue we can take. But what were some of the key differences between the two avenues?
A lot will depend on really your financial situation and your experience, and you have to know that you can cover yourself financially for that first year, 18 months while you grow, because the thing, you can do all the business plans in the world. The hardest thing is you don't know the rate of your growth. Now, it's easy to say, oh, at 3 months we'll be at this percent, at this month we'll be this percent occupancy. You don't know, and you have to prepare for all eventualities. So I always say, if you err on the side of caution, we're doing the calculations. I'm always somebody who errs on the side of caution. If you can make it work when it's a cautious plan, then you're going to make it work. But yes, you do need the experience, the time and the commitment to set it up from scratch. You seriously have to have the passion, because it is a very hard journey. But as I said, the positives are you're crafting your own nursery, you're setting up from scratch what you want to be truly embedded in it, how it's done. And it evolves, of course it evolves around your staff, your children, but it is very much your nursery, your baby. When you buy, you're obviously taking on what has been someone else's baby. And as Vicky said, they're all totally different. And I've looked at a lot myself to buy, or working with other nurseries. Settings are all so different, and it's trying to get to the heart of what they are, and it's always different things of what makes them. So when you're looking at buying a setting, it's trying to find one that fits you and what you're wanting to do and be. And you know, there's no point buying a setting that has a certain pedagogical or teaching style if it totally clashes with what you want it to be. But then likewise, at the moment, I'm looking to buy again. I know I haven't got the time to set one up from scratch, so I'm looking to buy again. So stages of life and different situations really doing different things. But when you are looking to buy, it's always the feel of the place. How does it feel? Do you get those by looking at the finances? Is a huge one. And the questions I always ask, it's the occupancy. What's the occupancy? How long the staff team have been there? Obviously the reason for sale. So I try and get a holistic picture of what it is. And it's always that informs whether you're interested in going to the next stages with it. So yes, I think the processes, maybe both of them, are harder than you first think. The easiest thing is finding something you like. The actual then going through your due diligence of buying or selling can be really stressful, but it's easier if the seller has got their ducks in a row and the figures are there and it's transparent. It makes the whole process a lot less stressful.
It does. It comes down to those key areas of information, which I guess if you were setting up from scratch, you know, they would be the first questions on your business plan. How are you going to staff it? What staff do you require? What are your rough staff costs going to be? Because essentially in a nursery, you know, your cost of sales is your staff. That is your product. You're offering care for children. Yes, you've got your consumables and you've got other outgoings as well. But effectively, when we do look at a profit and loss at a set of accounts, it's the cost of staff, which is the largest cost that we see. I mean, generally at the moment, we tend to find that staffing costs are roughly around, but they can range between 60 to 70%. Most now are airing more towards the 70% range, unless you.
10 years ago, it was 50 to 60.
Yeah. Well, even when I first started in this industry, I remember I do have all of the very old initiation documents that I have, and it was between 50 to 60. So, you know, it's a big change. And one of the biggest factors that comes into staffing, as you say, especially when you are either employing as a new operator setting up, or whether you are buying an established business is it's not just how many staff have you got, what are you paying them now? It is, dates of birth, not the age. These things vary over years. The length of service that you've got or those member of staff have is going to change every 3 months, every 6 months, every year. Equally the same with the age of your staff. National minimum wage and national living wage makes a big difference. And of course, we do see now quite a lot more apprentices coming through. And I think that we're going to continue to see more apprentices coming back into the sector, especially with some of the changes that have been announced to the level of qualifications required to enter the sector, which is really good. But all of these things do come into play, because equally, if you've got quite a large number of staff who are of a younger age and are under the threshold for the national minimum wage at the age of 21, that's going to change. So it's all of these little bits of detail that every nursery operator will know and will have, but is it there in a document ready to go? Because these are the sorts of things that that buyers will be asking. If you required a formal valuation of your business to go off and lend money to expand, build extensions on your properties, or look for other premises, this is the information again that you will need for a formal valuation. It's not just, do I want to sell? Do I want to stay? Do I want to buy? You never know what's going to happen, do you, for this information to be valid? And obviously that's where you help in preparing for that. Are there any interesting quirks you've seen? The emergence of forest schools, for example, which I know is in demand, and it's so important for children to be spending time outdoors and really making the most of that. But are there any other nuances or creative themes that you're seeing coming through that you maybe didn't see a few years ago?
There's several that have been around for a little while, being curiosity approach, accredited settings, there's some beach schools popping up. I think the key thing with this, though, is something I was going to mention before, that it's nurseries knowing what they are and what their identity is. So it might be, we are a beach school, we are a forest school, I'm a music-based nursery, what your USP is. And so a lot of settings, when I ask them, you'll probably have the same when you're preparing for sale, of what are you as a nursery? Because there's such a difference between what we call destination nurseries and location nurseries. Location nurseries, which are the nursery at the bottom of the road, that everyone will come through the door, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing beach school, forest school, music nursery, playing with whatever, they will come because it's just your local nursery and that's your demographic and it's what happens. Or like my nursery, I was on an industrial estate. It wasn't an area where there was a lot of housing around. People had to choose to come to me. If they're going to choose to come to you, you need to have an offering that they want to buy into. Because the amount of nurseries I work with, I say, tell me about your nursery. Well, we're family friendly. Everyone says how caring we are. And I'm saying, this is great, but what is it about you that is different about your setting that people are going to want to come to?
I'm seeing huge increases in the requirement for nutrition and dietary requirements in nurseries. When we're looking at businesses, the profitability of businesses, that obviously all links into the costs.
It has been a huge impact probably over the last 3 or 4 years. The change has been huge as to the numbers of dietary requirements, and there's personal preferences and parental preferences, as well as allergies, intolerances. And of course, there's also the other side of it as well, of trying to the child to feel included and not different meals, as well as a cook who's trying to cook a meal for a celiac in a separate area to something else. So it does bring operational challenges as well as a lot of costs. And it's the hard thing for a nursery owner. If you're charging you £2 a day for lunch, you're not going to go to little Johnny's mum. You have to pay £4 because he's on a dairy-free diet. But it meant that, for our setting in particular, what we did was we ended up, all our butter was dairy-free butter, all our milk, because you had so many children and you're trying to make meals as similar as possible. But there are a lot of requirements. So there is the cost side. Now, some nurseries have made it almost their USP and almost made it, we're organic nurseries, we're supporting it, which is great as well. But again, as part of it, there's a cost balance, and some things of your USP, whether it's food or other, will have a cost impact.
What do we think some of the other sort of key areas are going to be challenging moving forward? Changing staff ratios, for example. I know has sort of been a talking point, but not maybe a massive talking point, because most operators will say, well, you know, it doesn't really make a difference to us. We're still going to maintain the ratios that we have. But what's the sort of commentary around that you've found?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people start off there, I'm not budget from a 1 to 4, it's what we know, it's what we do. There's some people saying, oh, we'll use it in an emergency. Some people just gone, great, we need it. We've got our Scottish colleagues who said, we've been doing this for years, it's fine. And I think each nurse is finding their own way with it. Some people who said they weren't going to budge have had to budge. Some have found it's okay. Some are doing it dependent on the children. Because the thing is, you know, as a setting your own children, you know that on that day you can't because the children are in, it just wouldn't be safe or wouldn't be right or wouldn't be fair. And other days, if you've actually got predominantly 2s who are nearly 3, actually 2 members of staff with those 10 kids is okay. And I think this is where it's having managers and owners who understand what they're doing, why they're making those decisions, like we do with the children's learning, the why. It's the same thing. It's not just going, well, I've stick to 1 to 4 because we always do. Well, have you tried the 1 to 5? Was there an issue? Was there no? And it's making responsive decisions, because if you understand the financial impact and the educational impact, you can make wiser decisions, can't you? Of, well, actually, in this situation, it's okay. In this one, it's not. But actually, we might not need it all the time, but we do on a Tuesday. It isn't all doom and gloom in the sector. There is some positives with the funding, with the changes to the qualifications, with the staffing. I think it's making sure you're thinking about your whys when you're making decisions. But again, if you know your numbers, that helps inform your whys and helps you make wise decisions. But as I said, for some settings, it's going to be changing what they've always known and what they've always done, because actually it's going to be the settings that do the term time only school hours that are going to be mostly affected by some of the changes. So they're going to have to think about sustainability and viability and what models work. But there is obviously parental pressure. Well, we've always only wanted 9 till 4 and paid for that, and that could be a hard thing, because it's not just what model are you changing to, it's managing that change and how do we sell it to parents so that it's actually they can understand it's a positive or it's what we need to do and it's not just a negative thing.
And Jane, just explain to me, if you can, some of the key issues that you're finding in the sector at the moment with the clients you're working with.
Well, we can't get ahead of it, but obviously a change of government could change everything, couldn't it? That's the thing with the sector. You start working on one thing and change of government or a change of policy. We all know all about, sure starts are there, they're not, similar thing could happen with funding. All we can do is make the best decisions we can with what we've got now, but be aware looking ahead. So when we're making decisions, that's what I said, reviewing session models. It's not just doing it in response to the funding, it's doing what works for you as well. And it's trying to make it so that your model, whether it's private or funding, it won't make a difference to your bottom line because of how you've structured it. And that's the key thing, because if you changed it one way or the other, if it does change, you've got to make sure it works whichever way things go, which is why trying to get back onto long sessional days would be better. Because if you say have a child doing stretch funding, doing say on the 15 hours, so they're doing 11 a week, and they might be doing 1 long day and doing part of the next session as well. You can get a lot more children in the week for that place than you could one child who's coming 9 till 12 and things. But it's making sure that then if the funding goes and that child still comes for the 1 day, but they're paying, you're not seeing a difference in the finance coming in. It's just where it's coming from. What some settings are worried about is where different authorities have interpreted the funding agreements, obviously the central agreements, differently and formed their own things, and some authorities funding agreements are a lot tighter than others. Some give more flexibility. Some say things like you have to offer packed lunches. Some are quite dictatorial, which some nursery owners are finding hard if there is going to be more funding, saying we can't work quite in that way. For some, it's how the funding's paid. Some pay monthly. Some authorities are paying a chunk up front, some at the end. Some are saying it's going to be later, and therefore for cash flow, they're worried about that. So I think probably the short from what we said is really being clear what your identity is and who you are. So you really got sure what your packages of your setting, reevaluating your sessional models to make sure that they are working for you financially, making sure your funding models are compliant with your early years agreements, but also are working for you as well, and knowing where your cash flow is and what your cost is per head so that you're informed to make these decisions.
What are your plans for the rest of 2024? We've spoken quite a bit in the past. And you mentioned earlier that you haven't completely been put off at all by your experiences, and would be quite eager to look at other nurseries in the future, and obviously continuing your work with your consultancy business as well.
I've been working a lot with other people in the industry as well. So, for example, working with Imogen Edmonds at Red Wing Solutions. She's a specialist HR provider for early years, and we're putting on planning to put on a nursery owners summit in June in Leeds, 14th of June, trying to respond to the needs of nursery owners and all these things we've talked about. A lot of them say, but I haven't got time to do it, or I don't know how to do it. So we want to spend a day where we can help nursery owners with some of these very real issues and help give them some time and space, help get on top of them. And then the other thing, in my spare time, my husband and I also run an educational resources business that we took on about 6 months ago, the Little Coach House. So we make wooden learning resources, sort of Montessori inspired. So we're looking to develop our product range and things, and get into more nurseries. So they're sort of solid beach wooden learning resources. So there's plenty to keep me out of mischief. And as I said, at the moment, consultancy is pretty busy because everyone's wanting to do their fee reviews. So yes, I don't think 2024 is going to be a quiet year.
Thank you, Jane, for joining me today. I really have enjoyed the conversation we've had, and I really do hope that anyone watching has found this really helpful, and just giving you a bit of food for thought, really, areas that you can maybe consider and improve in your settings, and help to consider what your plans are, I guess, for 2024. You will have some details that will be shared shortly for myself and for Jane, so please do feel free to get in contact with us at any time if there are any topics that you'd like to discuss in more detail. Thank you very much.